Coming up in this week's Torah Pearls.
Egypt is called the iron furnace in one verse in Deuteronomy and one verse in one other book of the Hebrew Bible. Does this give us a clue as to one of the authors of Deuteronomy?
Israel is commanded not to take away from or to add to commandments, but are there any additions or subtractions in the Moses scroll?
Deuteronomy 4:44 says that this is the law that Moses set before the children of Israel. Is it?
The Shema. What does it mean when it says Jehovah Echad?
What is the one thing that, according to the Bible, God will do with all of his heart and all of his soul?
What is an anealog?
All right, Jono, we better jump into this one now if we're going to finish tonight.
It's a big one. We better start. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company here once again on truth2u.org. That's truth number 2 letter u.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me from the Horeb Institute in Louisiana is the author of the Moses Scroll, Ross K. Nichols. G'day, mate.
Hello, Jono. How are you, my friend?
Doing pretty well, thank you, my friend.
Man, I've got pages and notes.
Pages and pages. It's an enormous show. I was going to say to the viewers that you want to keep your Moses Scroll handy. If you don't have a copy of the Moses Scroll, my goodness, what have you only just joined us? Maybe you have.
Right. That's okay. Welcome either way.
Link in the description. So that is certainly a textbook for the Torah portions that we're dealing with now. Of course, we are in Deuteronomy. We started last week. This particular Torah portion, VaEtchanan, I think, is where we are. Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23 to 7:11. 7:11, Ross. And
7:11, man.
This is where we are. Among other textbooks, while we're talking about it, is, of course, the Torah tablet, one that you can write in and highlight, and it has
and I am putting some notes in mine. I tell you, I love
a bunch
them.
of features in there. Another textbook that I am also we're both using is the Jewish Study Bible. Some great study notes in there. And speaking of study notes, of course, the New Oxford Annotated Bible as well. These are super handy.
All of these, by the way, all of these books and more are in the description. We've got some good recommendations there for some good reading material.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
This is one of the greatest books ever written, is the way I put it. I mean, Dead Sea Scroll people quote it more often than almost any other book. I think it only ranks even close with Isaiah and the Psalms. The New Testament, the Christian New Testament,
Jesus'
Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
true.
It's
my favorite book. That's right.
It's my favorite book as well. So we're happy to be in it. And this one, as I mentioned, is enormous. It's just got so much in it. So we have to rip through it as quickly as possible. And to do that, we have our AI critical scholar, EZRA. So EZRA, can you kick us off with an academic overview?
Here's the scholarly backbone of VaEtchanan. This portion covers material from Deuteronomy's early chapters, where Moses is functioning more like a national archivist than a lawgiver. He's recounting Israel's past not just to remind, but to reframe. The big themes: covenant loyalty, exclusivity of Yahweh, and the theology of memory. And academically, this is vintage Deuteronomistic style, rhetorical, didactic, and deeply concerned with obedience tied to land retention. From a documentary perspective, most of this material is rooted in the D source, Deuteronomist. It reflects the ideological concerns of the late monarchic or exilic period: centralization of worship, rejection of idolatry, and a theology of conditional possession. The retelling of Sinai here isn't just nostalgia, it's a theological reframing. It strips out the visual and centers on the voice, emphasizing that Israel saw no form, only heard sound. That's polemic, targeting image-based worship. And then, of course, we get the Shema, likely a later insertion, but crafted to be the core confessional statement of Israelite monotheism, or more accurately, monolatry, moving toward monotheism. It's theology in poetic compression. So academically, VaEtchanan is less about moving the story forward and more about solidifying the ideological foundation of the Deuteronomic history: fidelity, memory, and exclusive devotion to Yahweh. It's theology through repetition.
Yeah,
VaEtchanan. I've been saying this wrong for I don't know how long.
But that's good, though. I think that's fair effort of highlighting all the points that we're going to hit on, actually. So this is good. I think that's a good summary. Thank you, Ezra. So Where are we going to kick off? We'll kick off at the very beginning. Yes, Ross.
Yep. Go ahead.
Well,
I'm ready.
How about it starts at 3:23. I pleaded, Ross, with Lord. This is Moses at that time saying, "Oh, Lord God." By the way, Lord God. Okay, so now we have Lord in lowercase. So this must be what is this? Adonai Jehovah? What do we have here?
I have to look. I'll pull up the Hebrew in just a minute. Yeah,
it's a little bit different. You who let your servant see the first works of your greatness and your mighty hand, and whose powerful deeds no God in heaven or on earth can equal. No God in heaven or on earth can equal. So to Ezra's point, monotheism, or what is the other word? The other term that's used?
Monolatry.
Yeah, and that verse there seems to reflect monolatry a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. By the way, it's Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Adonai Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in that verse. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we encounter in this particular Torah portion. We'll get to it in Deuteronomy 4, but that the traces that Ezra was referring to and that most scholars refer to when they talk about later, from the monarchy even into later periods where you really, by this point, we begin to see strict monotheism. Monolatry says that there are other gods, but only one is allowed, whereas monotheism says, no, there's only one God. Quite right. Most scholars believe there's a transfer from monolatry into monotheism.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And I'm just off the top of my head, I just think that Adonai Yehovah is a designation that is used far later in sources in the Bible. I don't think we see that very often in the Torah. Anyway, people can do their research on that. It goes on.
Well, no, let me just tell you. I'm sorry. I jumped in and checked it. We find it. Yep, I just did the search. We get 302 times in 292 verses, but in the Pentateuch, we have 2 passages in Genesis 15, same chapter, which ought to tell us something. That's chapter 15. Right. Deuteronomy chapter 3, Deuteronomy chapter 9, and then the rest elsewhere in the Bible. So we have 2 in chapter 15.
Most of those are in Ezekiel, I think, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong about that.
Maybe so.
But very much later. So it does give us a clue that this is a later writer. We'll be talking about that. And so he's saying, look, I want to go in. Can't you just let me come on? Let me
please,
and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that good hill country and the Lebanon. But Ross, Jehovah was wrathful with me on your account. You people,
that's right.
Listen, would not listen to me. Now, here's a question. Is it because of the sin of not going up and taking the hill country of the Amorites as they were commanded to do? Remember, we were talking about this last Torah portion. Is it because of the fighting men that didn't go up and take the battle, or is it because of the 12 spies that supposedly came back and gave a bad report? That story is not in Deuteronomy. Your thoughts?
Or is it because Moses was supposed to speak to a rock and he struck a rock and then he struck it twice? And
that's right.
Look, we get all these different things. And then one other point that I'll throw in the mix, because the answer is it just depends on what you read. Moses says here, and in 3 other places in Deuteronomy, it's because of you that God is mad at me. Whereas if you read Numbers chapter 20, verse 10 through 13, and Numbers 27, 12 through 23, it's not their fault. It's his fault.
It's his fault and Aaron's fault. And
Aaron's
already
dead.
He's already dead. He's paid the price. And the same fate awaits Moses, depending on which source you read. Okay, but it goes on. God says to him, look, stop it. Stop talking to me. I don't want to hear about this anymore. Joshua's the man.
Like you would tell a child that just won't stop. You're just like, that is enough. I don't want to hear any more about this. Just stop.
Yeah. So that's it.
By the way, one more point about this is that this particular passage in chapter 3, where it says you're going to go up, you're going to look over, you're going to see the land, and then you're going to die. I did a class on this a few weeks ago, but this has to be looked at, studied, compared, Deuteronomy 3, verse 27, with Numbers 27, 12 and following, Deuteronomy 32, 48 through 52, and Deuteronomy 34. all of those are go up, look over, see the land, and then die. And we just read them like it's almost like God would tell him 4 times, okay, 3 times. You're going to go up there, you're going to look, you're going to die. You're going to go up there, you're going to look, you're going to die. You're going to go. Come on. I mean, these are different sources of
Absolutely
the same story, I believe. Yeah.
And just to remind everybody in the Moses Scroll, it's just that all it says at the end is, look, I'm 120, I'm done. Can you guys go, leave me in peace, please? I'm 120. I mean,
you
good
guys
heavens.
Go ahead.
When we go on the Tanakh tour, Ross, like sometimes we'll go to the Mount of Olives and then we'll walk down through the Kidron Valley, which is an incredible walk, steep, and then up to the Temple Mount. And it's really quite a hike. It's one of the, we've got a handful of hikes that we do. But it's an effort. And if I was 120 and I was sitting on the Mount of Olives and you said, okay, everyone, we're going to walk down, I'd be like, dude, I'm just going to stay in the bus.
Y'all go. I got this. I'm going to wait right here on the bus.
Yeah.
And we do have people do that sometimes. And I don't blame them.
And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. They're not 120. They might be, 70 or 80.
That's
but
right.
it's absolutely fine. But I totally get Moses, right?
I do too.
In the Moses Scroll, this is it. No reason need be given but his age. We find ourselves in 329, and it says, now, by the way, this whole section, the opening of this Torah portion is not in the Moses Scroll, but verse 29, it says, meanwhile, Ross, back on the farm, we stayed on in the valley near Beit Peor, and now we find ourselves back in the matter of Peor, as it's referred to in a couple of other places in the Tanakh. And what we get, again, is a very different story to that which we find in Numbers and even that which we find in the Moses Scroll. This is an interesting thing. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, Ross.
Oh, no. Don't tell me. It can't be so.
Can't be so. But a little bit like our spies narrative. We did this last week. There is a spies narrative, a very, very short few verses in Deuteronomy that is very different to that which we find in Numbers. Numbers is quite elaborate, right? But in the Moses Scroll, it's not there at all. Having said that, and I think I said last week, I look at the spies narrative in Deuteronomy and I think, if it was in the Moses Scroll, though, I don't see how this would be inconsistent with the theology of the Moses Scroll as a whole. I can see how they would request to, spy out the land before they go in to see which is the best way to take the land. Let's check out the cities. Let's plan the way that we would do this battle. That's fine. Moses is like, yep, go and do that's a good idea, because we see that later with
Jazer. Yeah.
Jazer, thank you. And in the Moses Scroll, and they do that. They come back with a good report, but it turns out that the brothers have sown doubt in the mind of those that remain, and they refuse to go up, and so on and so forth. And that's what happens. If that were in the Moses Scroll, I don't have a problem.
Wouldn't
with
be a problem. Yeah.
What I have a problem, though, and people know this, is I find theological friction on a number of counts in the pericope that is Baal Peor in the Moses Scroll. It's always been problematic, and I've sought, as you well know, painfully, to find permissible readings within the Hebrew that might, smooth out these frictions, right? But it's just one section that really bothers me in the Moses Scroll. Here, in our Torah portion, it reads differently, and it reads differently in a way that I don't have a problem with. It's 2 verses, not dissimilar to the spies narrative in our previous Torah portion. So let me read the way that it goes. It says, and I think this is the ASV version, this is in the Torah tablet, and now, O Israel, hearken. This is from chapter 4, verse 1 to 4.
Okay.
O Israel, hearken unto the to the statutes and unto the ordinances which I will teach you, to do them, that you might live, and that you go in and possess the land which Jehovah your God of your fathers gives you. You will not. Now, this is interesting, Ross, because within this little pericope we have the commandment: you shall not add unto the word.
Yeah, we're going to have to come back to this. If
you're going to have to come back to it.
Okay, go ahead.
I know.
Yeah.
I know it. You shall not add to the commandment which I give you, neither shall you diminish from it, that you may keep the commandments of Jehovah your God with which I command you. Here it is, verse 3. Ready? Verse 3, verse 4. This is all it has on Beit Peor. Your eyes have seen what Jehovah did because of Baal Peor. All all the men, what men, we're not sure, but all the men that followed Baal Peor, Jehovah thy God hath destroyed them from the midst of thee. But ye that did cleave unto Jehovah your God are alive, every one of you this day. That's it, right? Now, I'm going to say there was a reason. You shared this paper with me, a paper by Friedberg and Hopp, and it's entitled, Did the Shapira Manuscript Betray an Unambiguous Pentateuchal Perspective, a Rejoiner to Stack It? And basically, it's just a discussion on, it's a reply to another paper, and it's basically a discussion on, is the Moses Scroll a proto-Deuteronomy? Is it a proto-biblical book? Or is it just a proto-biblical book that is one of various traditions that were evolving, like the Deuteronomy that we have today? And the argument goes back and forth. And it's really interesting, actually. Maybe we can put a link in the description. But Friedberg and Hopp raise one example, and that is the Beit Peor pericope. And they say, if Deuteronomy evolved from the Moses Scroll, why would Deuteronomy omit the expanded narrative? In other words, why doesn't it appear in Deuteronomy in the same way that it appears in the Moses Scroll? It's a good question. More specifically, they say, one must consider why an editor would remove such a significant and meaningful pericope, particularly one consistent with the narrative. And I've wondered this myself. You probably wondered it as well. And so I did the experiment, and what I found is that if you take the Baal Peor section of the Moses Scroll out and insert Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 3 to 4, where Deuteronomy places it into the Moses Scroll, then it's possible that the original Moses Scroll maybe read this way. You ready? It would read like this. And we turned and we set out towards the Negev, and we dwelt in front of Beit Peor. And Elohim commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, to do them in the land that you are crossing there to possess it. Guard yourselves, you shall not add to his commandment, and you shall not diminish from it. Your eyes are seeing that which Elohim has done in Baal Peor. For every man who has gone after Baal Peor, Elohim your God has destroyed from your midst. And you, who are cleaving to Elohim your God, are alive today. All of you, guard yourselves, lest you forget, and you make a carved thing for yourself, or a formed thing, a shape of any figurine, which is in the heavens above, or which is on the earth below, which is in the waters under the earth, and his anger burn against you, and he destroy you quickly from that good land. Now, I'm going to say, when you insert this little Deuteronomy 4, verses 3 to 4 into the Moses Scroll there, it flows perfectly. And some of the frictions that appear disappear. So, for example, who has gone after Baal Peor, not who has joined Baal Peor. We're not talking about Baal Peor as a god that actually exists, that they actually go and join themselves to in some way. They've just followed after another, a false god, if you like. And the captives in the Moses Scroll, we went and battled and we took captives back with us. Well, if this was a practice, why don't we read about this in the previous battles within the Moses Scroll? Why does it only pop up here? That goes away. There's a number of other things as well by which I look at this and I wonder to myself if this is actually more reflective of the original. And I'm inclined to favor it. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's certainly something I know you've focused a lot more on it than I have. All I would say is that if we look at a text like the Moses Scroll, the way that we currently have it, we do know, and I've made it very clear, and I wrote about this in the book, it does not represent the scroll that Moses wrote. We believe that it represents an early copy of what later was amended and edited and so forth. And we get evidence of that in the fact that we have the opening and closing lines, at the very least, which have been added to what we think is an earlier document. But as far as the Baal Peor and the Beit Peor, I don't know. I haven't given it as much thought as you have. So it's
and we also get evidence of that, and we're going to be talking about that very shortly in one of the commandments. So we'll be there soon enough. But I'm just floating that by people.
It's something to think about, and we'll have to have. Maybe you'll send me that link that I sent you and send it back to me, and we'll put it in the description below.
We can do that.
Cool.
All right, so there is that, and that is why it's a little bit different, perhaps. Verse 13 of chapter 4.
No.
Okay,
There is no way we're going to just jump into verse 13. We have to go back. We have to pick up that there are a couple of things. Number one, chapter 4, verse 5, verse 8, and verse 14 talk about statutes and ordinances. Now, the way most people think of this is they think that this is something other than, it can't be the 10 commandments, the 10 words, which we're soon enough to get to, because what they do is they say, well, the Hebrew word chok, which is, clearly here, and mishpat, that those two words can't apply to the 10 words, but we're going to challenge that. In fact, there's one verse that I want to pick up just quickly. If people can go to Malachi chapter 4, verse 4. Now, this is a late text, Malachi 4:4, but it's, if you're in a Hebrew Bible, it's going to be, 3:22, I believe.
Okay.
But in 4:4, remember the teaching or the Torah of my servant Moses, the statutes and ordinances that I commanded him at Horeb for all Israel. Now, what I would say, and we're going to see this later, I don't want to go too deeply into it yet, but later in this discussion, we're going to see that I'm going to equate the statutes and judgments, or statutes and ordinances, as the ASV says, with those 10 words, that is what that is, and not another body of legal material. The other thing that I would say is that we read quickly chapter 4, verse 2 in Deuteronomy, don't add to or take away from. This is part of the Moses scroll, and it appears here, and it also appears in chapter 13, verse 1, or chapter 12, verse 32.
Yep.
So here's the question, Jono. Why do you need it? If you've got it in chapter 4, verse 2, and we see it in the Moses scroll, why do you also have it in chapter 12? Because chapter 12 is a different body of legal material from chapter 12 to 26. So, and most scholars then in the 1800s, as well as now, would probably argue that that is the earliest strata of law code. In fact, it's called the Deuteronomy Law Code. So just quickly, I just want to draw our attention to the fact that you have this kind of a scribal warning in chapter 4, but we also have it in 12. It's the same scribal warning that we see in the book of Revelation, chapter 22. Cursed is the one who adds to or takes away from, and you're going to get this taken away from in the world to come. This idea is just a scribal cautionary note, but it's indicative. When you see it in both these places, I think it says, hey, I'm a different document altogether. So I just wanted to grab that. In other words, before we go forward, I'm ready. Next point.
Quite right. Now, by the way, actually, before I get to 13, I just want to say that these verses from 5 to 8 are really an expansion of a verse that is in the Moses scroll. And I kind of like the way that this is expanded. So I'm just going to read from verse 6. Observe them faithfully for that will be your proof in of your wisdom and discernment to the other peoples on hearing all of these laws, the other nations. Surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what great nation is there that has a God so close at hand that the Lord our God, whenever we call on him, or what great nation has laws and rules as perfect as all this teaching that I set before you today? Again, an expansion of something that is in the Moses scroll, but the idea behind it is that it should be observable and repeatable. So Israel is supposed to observe these 10 rules, be observably blessed because of the observation of the conditions of the contract, and therefore the nations around have a look and they say, well, look, these are the laws that they hold to, and look at the way that they are blessed, and look that God acts on their behalf. And the idea, I think, behind this is perhaps we should emulate that. Perhaps we should, the nation should look at that and say, maybe we can take from this and maybe God will act on our behalf as well if we conduct ourselves in such a way. Maybe.
Yeah, it's called like a model of excellence. We do this, and people do this in business and in manufacturing. Yeah. They find one part and they really, really focus on getting that done well, and then others begin to look and say, "Hey, this is great. I'll model mine after yours," and that's what we're asking for here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, quite right.
4:13.
I was just going to jump to 13 because here we have a phrase: "He declared to you the covenant that he commanded you to observe." The 10 Commandments, Ross. The 10 Commandments.
10 Commandments. Yeah,
how often do we see this phrase?
3 times. 3 times in the Pentateuch, twice in Deuteronomy, here in chapter 4, verse 13, once again in chapter 10 and verse 4, and then we see it way back in Exodus 34, verse 28. The thing about Exodus 34, 28, we did that when we were in Exodus 34. That is a very strange passage. It is called by scholars part of the priestly 10,
yes,
and it's a totally different 10. You can't it's not
10.
The same 10 words.
It has some overlap here and there, but generally it's a
little bit. Yeah, but I mean, even if you find difference in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, this is way different. We're not even sure who wrote it. And I mean, like in the story, is God writing it on the stones or is it Moses? Looks like it's Moses. So anyway, but those 3 passages, all 3 of which in the Hebrew say Aseret HaDevarim, which means the 10 words.
Yep.
All 3 of those in most English translations are translated 10 Commandments, which is where we get our term, and it's not right.
That's right.
And by the way, that goes back to this idea I was saying. We say 10 commandments, but there aren't 10 for a lot of reasons. We can talk about that. And even if we count those and we look at them, they're not called commandments, which would be mitzvot.
That's right.
They're called something else.
Exactly.
All
right. So it's a fascinating thing. 10 commandments on two tablets of stone, and of course the question is why 2 tablets of stone? And let me tell you that the answer is not to be found in our canonical text. In the Tanakh as a whole, it will not tell you why there are 2 tablets of stone. Is the font too big? Did God write in a font that was too big that he needed 2 tablets of stone?
Yeah,
why not have one larger tablet? Or are they in duplicate? Or do they have some on one and some on the other purposefully? And if so, how is that divided? We can only speculate. We have no answers. However, and I'm not going to talk about it here in detail, but I do believe I have an answer. And I do believe that answer is to be found in the Moses Scroll. This is taking up all of my time, Ross, when I'm not studying.
Oh, you're not going to get into this. Oh, my goodness.
I'm not going to get it. Okay. We do not have the time, and now is not the place nor the time.
But I know what you're getting into, and I know how good it is, so I'm excited about when you do reveal this. But go ahead.
It might be weeks or months, probably months away. Because it's like I said to you earlier on, I feel like I've bitten off more than I can chew. But the answer is found in the Moses Scroll, and it's spectacular. More to come on that a little bit later.
Okay, I'm going to bring Ezra in. Hold on, I'm going to bring Ezra in. I have to. What I want to know from Ezra, just because I'm curious, we touch on the stone tablets. There are several passages which deal with the stone tablets that tell us a little bit about, maybe they're written this way and that way. But I want to get Ezra to give us kind of an overall, and then the differences between the way that these 2 stone tablets are presented in Exodus through Numbers and then in Deuteronomy, kind of contrast it. So Ezra, help us out here.
They're small in size, but theologically they're massive. In Exodus, particularly in the Sinai narrative, the tablets are introduced as the tablets of the testimony. That word, edut, frames them as a kind of divine legal witness. They're given to Moses, written by the finger of God, and they come after that dramatic theophany on the mountain. They're not just instructions, they're a tangible form of divine communication. When Moses shatters the first set, it isn't just anger, it's symbolic. Israel's broken the covenant before it even had a chance to be ratified. Now in Deuteronomy, Moses retells the story, but the language shifts. Suddenly, the tablets are the tablets of the covenant. That's not a throwaway synonym. It reframes the tablets as the core of Israel's legal relationship with Yahweh. This shift fits the broader Deuteronomic agenda, which is all about the terms and conditions of Israel's occupancy of the land. The emphasis here is covenantal fidelity, not just divine proclamation. Also, in Deuteronomy, Moses makes himself more central to the narrative. In Exodus, it's God writing the tablets, even crafting them. In Deuteronomy, Moses says, "I was on the mountain, and Yahweh gave me the 2 tablets." It's a subtle shift, but it downplays the supernatural and ups the prophetic authority of Moses himself. Again, that's classic D-source ideology. Centralized leadership, centralized worship, and a more mediated form of revelation. So, 2 sets of tablets, same commandments, different theological packaging. In Exodus, they're testimony, legal evidence of divine speech. In Deuteronomy, they're covenant, a symbol of Israel's binding obligation to live faithfully. One highlights the voice from the fire, the other, the enduring bond through obedience. And that's the beauty of Torah. Same object, evolving meaning.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. Well, I was just going to say, one of the main takeaways from that I want people to get is that in Exodus and, what we call the Tetratuch, before you get to Deuteronomy, you deal with the covenant, and it's the testimony, the Ark of the Testimony, the Tabernacle of the Testimony, the Deut, over and over and over. You get to Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy always, without exception, calls it the covenant, the covenant, the covenant, the Ark of the Covenant, the box, the chest of the covenant. And it never uses a Deut in the sense that the other books use it. So I would just say a little bit differently than what Ezra says here. It's not a retelling. This is a whole different story. It's not like Moses, a few years later, he's like, "Oh, I can't quite remember what I said earlier. Let me give it to you the way I think about it now." No, it's a different author. And what's interesting, we're going to see this, is that Deuteronomy is the only book which uses first-person narration, which is similar to what we find in the Moses scroll, and there's a lot of overlap. So
that's right.
That was the main point. Mm-hmm.
And every now and then we're going to see third person, which is very, very telling. Now, just going back a little bit, you rightly pointed out that only 3 times is the 10 Commandments mentioned here in our Torah portion right here, but they're not actually called the 10 Commandments, as you pointed out. They're the 10 words, and that's the way that the Moses scroll always refers to it. And the interesting thing about that is where we get the word decalogue, right? Dec is 10, and log this is a Greek term, 10
I
words.
like that
right?
Greek term.
I like it. I think it's absolutely appropriate. And as I mentioned to you earlier in the week, what we actually have in our canonical text, according to the same Greek terminology, is an neologue, ENNEALOGUE, a neologue. That is 9 words. We've got 9 words in both Exodus and Deuteronomy. We're going to be going through those. Now, where are we? I was going to look. What's the next verse you want to highlight here?
I want to hit 420. If you've got anything before that, I just want to touch it briefly.
You know what is funny though? Before we get to 420, it says here in 13, okay, 10 commandments, he inscribed them on 2 tablets of stone. 14 says, and at the same time, Ross, the Lord commanded me to impart to you laws and rules for you to observe in the land that you are, as if there's like another body of text. There's the 10 commandments, and at the same time.
That's the point. That's the point I was going to make. Yeah. I think they are the same. Yeah.
And we're going to see Deuteronomy try and pass off an additional code a little bit further in this Torah portion. Go ahead.
Okay, 420. But Jehovah hath taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance, as it is this day. Now, just to highlight the phrase iron furnace, that's used only one other time, Jono, and interestingly enough, it's in Jeremiah 11:4. Now, one thing I wanted to say, this book is in the comment section, the description below, the Bible with sources revealed, and Richard Elliott Friedman has a section that shows some of the interesting points about D and phrases that we meet in D that we only meet elsewhere in Jeremiah. But what I find to be quite compelling, and most scholars will date the book of Deuteronomy latest of all, right? You've got E, J, P. They would date Deuteronomy all the way. Well, there's some debate, but most people date it to roughly 622 BCE, 7th century, because they say, well, this is when the scroll was found, and when the scroll was found in 2 Kings 23, 2 Chronicles 34, it sounds like Deuteronomy. Well, it is Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
So here's the point. I'm not even surprised that Jeremiah talks about iron furnace, and the Moses here in his mouth has put the phrase iron furnace. It's the same author, quite possibly. This is what we're looking at.
Are you saying that Jeremiah is the Deuteronomist?
I am saying that there is a high probability that someone in that court of Josiah, and a very possible candidate could be Baruch or Jeremiah. But absolutely, yes. And we're going to see that over and over. We're going to see very interesting connections.
I'm going to agree with you 100%. And this is worth thinking about. I think, because what we do see, Ross, is not only vocabulary, specific vocabulary that overlaps with the Moses scroll that doesn't show up in Deuteronomy, and we're going to talk about some of those examples coming up. But we also see an even larger list of examples of vocabulary and phrases that show up in Deuteronomy and Jeremiah, to your point. It absolutely suggests that Jeremiah was the Deuteronomist, or Baruch, and that not only were they familiar with the Moses scroll, but they were also perhaps commissioned to assist in the Josiah Revised Version. And perhaps this eventually was done in a way, and this is speculation now, in a way that eventually perhaps we were a team, and perhaps this was eventually this took a turn and went in a direction that Jeremiah didn't approve of, and he makes that disapproval quite obvious in chapter 7 of Jeremiah.
Yeah,
and perhaps, Ross, perhaps this is the reason why he found himself in the dungeon, because he didn't agree with the way that things were heading. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I love the idea. And listen to this. Here's the other thing. We have two prophets that are alive. Now, I'm not excluding the prophetess Huldah, but she got it wrong anyway. But anyway, if I want to talk about two prophets alive and well in the time of this discovery in the days of Josiah, you've got Zephaniah and you've got Jeremiah. Both of these. Now, if you read Kings and Chronicles, the story of the days of Josiah, it says, oh, there's this great revival in the land. Everybody is serving God. They recovenanted. They rebuilt the temple. They did all these good things. But if you put a microphone to Jeremiah and Zephaniah and you go, hey, guys, come here. You guys are both prophets. You see a revival? What does the Lord say about that? Jeremiah and Zephaniah would say, I don't see a revival. There's no revival. This place is going down. And in addition to that, both Jeremiah and Zephaniah claim that the Bible, the Torah, is, Jeremiah says, made into a lie. Zephaniah says that the priests have done violence to the Torah. They both happen to be alive at that time, and ultimately the temple is destroyed. Now, here's something interesting. Not only is it destroyed, but there is an exile. Well, guess what, Deuteronomy 4, right after we encounter what could be the Deuteronomist, we see mention of exile and being carried away. Most scholars believe that this language in Deuteronomy 4, if you look in the Torah tablet, it calls it DTR2.
Right.
What scholars believe is that this is a second layer which was added by the Deuteronomist, which predicted things that their eyes were seeing, being scattered through the nations and all right? Now, when I first heard that, I did not like that at all, Jono, because I was much more fundamentalist. But the more I think about the intricacies of how this text came to be and how it looks like certain things were added at different times, it's certainly, there's a possibility that that's right.
Certainly made sense. So R2D2 or DTR2, according to Richard Elliott Friedman, begins in chapter 4, verse 25 to verse 31. Now, Baden has a little bit of a different view on that, but they both agree that something's going on. Baden says, look, chapter 4, verse 15 to 31 is the redactor or a later author. He's saying redactor or other. Also, he attributes to verse 35, 39, 40 to 40, 41 to 43. Whereas Rich Elliott Friedman, as I mentioned, he switches back to DTR1, which may be Jeremiah, at verse 32. The interesting thing about this, Ross, is that within all of these verses, I think, if I'm not mistaken, only chapter 4, verse 40 of Deuteronomy is derived from the Moses Scroll. And in the Moses Scroll, it reads like this. It says, "And you shall know today, and you shall guard his statutes and his commandments for the sake of your good and for lengthening the days upon the land which Elohim your Elohim gives you." We're going to talk about that again a little bit later on when we get to our 10 commandments. But then from chapter 4, verse 44 to 5, verse 1, it switches to third person. But before we get there, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that one more time because I interrupted you. I want to hear that one more time. No,
I was just going to say from my understanding is that chapter 4, verse 44 to chapter 5, verse 1 switches to third person, which tells us that it's a different author. But before we get there, you go ahead.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm stuck on this Jeremiah thing. This is my Beit Peor, my Baal Peor for this lesson.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so here we go. Verse 29 of chapter 4 says, with all your heart and with all your soul.
Yep.
This phrase appears 9 times in Deuteronomy. Now, look, it doesn't appear in Genesis, not in Exodus, not in Leviticus, not in Numbers, only in Deuteronomy. And listen, Jono, it's exact. With all of your heart, with all of your soul. 9 times. We're going to see it a couple of more times in this Torah portion. And there is an interesting thing about this. It appears in texts that are associated with what scholars call the Deuteronomist. That's a hard word to say.
Supercalifragilistic.
Yeah, that's right. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. One of which we're going to see in chapter 6, known as the Ahavta. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your everything, if you will. Now, the only other time that phrase, anything close to that, appears is in one other book, one other mention, and it's in 2 Kings, actually 2 places, 2 Kings 23, 2 Chronicles 34, both of which are describing a king, a monarch who was righteous, so righteous, Jono, with all his heart, with all his soul, and it's Josiah, who was the guy who was king when the original Moses scroll was found. Now, this phrase, heart and soul, with all your heart, with all your soul, is found in the Moses scroll, but it catches on, and it's used all these other times. Now, one thing, and then I'm going to be ready to move on, because I'm going to ask Ezra, and I'm going to ask our viewers, there's one passage in the Hebrew Bible, listen up, Ezra, that it says God will do something with all of his heart and all of his soul. What is it?
Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, you tell me if you know. Well, wait, but if you think, if you know it, I want to see if Ezra knows it too. Do you know it?
Well, isn't it to bring Israel back into the land?
Yep. Okay. Yep. There you go. All right. So we don't have to ask Ezra.
I'm interested. I'm interested in what Ezra has to say because. Ask Ezra,
well, don't say any more then, because you'll give too much away. Let's see, Ezra. What do you think? What is it that God is going to do, according to the biblical writers, with all his heart, with all his soul? And while you're talking about it, give us a little bit more about this phrase, with all the heart and all the soul.
The only time in the Hebrew Bible where God is said to do something with all his heart and all his soul is in Jeremiah. Specifically, when he promises to plant Israel back in the land. That's right, not judgment, not wrath, not even creation, but restoration. The text says, I will plant them in this land in truth with all my heart and with all my soul. Now that's striking, because the phrase is almost exclusively directed at human devotion to God. It shows up first in Deuteronomy, in the Shema. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul. It's a demand for total loyalty, no divided allegiance. The heart in Hebrew thought isn't emotion, it's the center of decision-making. The soul, or nephesh, is the very life force, the self. So when God mirrors that language in Jeremiah, it flips the script. It's covenant reciprocity. The same total commitment God asks of Israel, he pledges in return, not just emotionally, but existentially, not just with power, but with purpose. In short, Israel's restoration isn't just policy, it's personal.
Well, there you go. Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 41. You nailed it. Ezra, it took Ezra just a second. He kind of had to think about it. But listen to this. He did say the first mention is chapter 6, verse 5. That's not true.
That's not
it's
true. It's
429. Look at 429. Right. But from thence, here we are in this later Deuteronomist writing, and it says, from thence, from the dispersion, ye shall seek Jehovah your God, and you shall find him when you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. Even when you find yourself in tribulation, right? So, but yeah, those verses, in fact, that's an interesting study there. Again, the only other time is in Josiah. The only person who actually does anything with all their heart and soul is Josiah. I find that striking. So we're starting to stack up the evidence that ties the language of Deuteronomy with the time of Jeremiah and Josiah. Something's going on.
Right. Yeah, overwhelming evidence. And as you quite rightly pointed out, it's not the first time in the Shema that that phrase is mentioned. It's in the verse we're looking at here, but it is also actually the first time that it is used in the Moses scroll. That is in the Shema, and it says, "Hear, O Israel." Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about that in a minute, because the interesting thing about it is that when we get to chapter 5, where we are now,
right?
We ordinarily, if we're looking at the Moses scroll, we're going to see the Shema prior to the 10 words, but not so in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, we have the 10 words, and then after that gets placed the Shema, and it has with all heart and with all soul.
Now, before you get to chapter 5, let me just touch one. In chapter 4, verse 44, it says, "This is the Torah." Look at the language there. Let's pull it up. Chapter 4, verse 44. "And this is the Torah, the law which Moses set before the children of Israel. These are the testimonies, the statutes, and ordinances which Moses spake unto the children of Israel when they came forth out of Egypt." Now, first of all, as you pointed out a moment ago, here we are in a third-person text. A lot of this material has been first person, and the Lord spoke unto me, and so forth. But this is third person. Someone is speaking on behalf. Someone is speaking on behalf of Moses. And the thing that I'd want to ask is this the Torah that Moses set before the children of Israel? And the answer for me is no. However, the phrase, "this is the Torah," we see 20 times in 18 verses in Deuteronomy. This particular phrase, "HaTorah hazot," "HaTorah hazeh," meaning this Torah. And I think that is a memory of this document containing that original Torah that Moses wrote. So anyway, we'll talk more about that as we go through Deuteronomy. But that phrase, by the way, is found in the Moses scroll in GD 10 and HA 6. This teaching, or this Torah. So we see it in the Moses scroll as well.
I am about to jump to verse 5. It's so hard to do, but I'm about to jump to 5:5. Is there anything before 5:5 that you want to highlight, Ross?
One other, please. Give me one more. 446 and 447 mention beyond the Jordan. The writer, this third-person writer, is on the wrong side of the river to be Moses.
Once again.
Now I'm ready. I am ready to roll into 5.
Very good. 5. Look, I have to read it. Look, okay, so, "And Moses called unto the children of Israel. He said to them, Look, hear, O Israel, the statutes and the ordinances that I speak in your ears today, that you have learned, and you should observe them. And Jehovah your God made a covenant with us in Horeb, and Jehovah made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are here alive this very day." Verse 4, "Jehovah spake with you face to face in the mountain," face to face. So there's another example. We anthropomorphic language, don't have that in the Moses scroll. out of the midst of the fire. Verse 5, here it is. And I stood between Jehovah and you at that time to show you the word of Jehovah, for you were afraid to go up because of the fire, and you didn't go up in the mountain. Okay, so there's a lot of controversy sometimes around this verse because we have in so many places before in our Torah portion today and last week as well, they didn't see anything. They didn't, but they heard audibly the 10 words that were spoken to them. And then all of a sudden here, it's as if Moses is saying, hey, I stood between you and Jehovah at that time to tell you what he was saying. It kind of sounds a little bit like that. And it sounds that way in the Moses scroll as well. It presents that way. Well, what happens is we see this reflected in many translations, is that this is placed in parentheses. It's in brackets. It's as if Moses is interjecting. And the way that it would read, let me see, it would, in the Moses scroll, I think it says...
in the Torah tablet, it's like that too, by the way.
It's like that. So in the Moses scroll, it says, because Elohim made a covenant with you in Horeb on the day of the assembly, and I stood between Elohim and you at that time, because you were awestruck by the face of the fire, and you did not go up to declare to you the word of Elohim, saying. So the problem is, and I stood between Elohim and you at that time, because you were not. So if you put that in brackets of Moses, interjecting and saying, you were scared of the fire, so I stood between you so that you you guys don't freak out, think that you're going to be consumed, right? Yeah. Then what that would do is connect the previous clause with the latter clause, and it would sound like this: Elohim made a covenant with you in Horeb on the day of the assembly to declare to you the word of Elohim, saying, declare to you. So it is a continuation of Elohim about to announce to you and that's the way that most translations deal with this as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Good thing. Good thinking. Yep.
Here it is. 5:6. We finally.
By the way, chapter 5 begins with, and you read it, but just to highlight, he's preparing them for what's coming, which are the 10 words. Notice in verse 1, these are the statutes and the ordinances. See, so people go, the 10 commandments and the statutes and ordinances are something else. No. Get ready. These are the statutes and ordinances that we've been talking about are coming. The 10 words, they're the statutes and ordinances. And anyway, I'm ready.
I am Jehovah thy God, it says in Deuteronomy, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Verse 6, just a little bit different to what appears in the Moses scroll already. Of course, just to remind everybody, in the Moses scroll, it uses Elohim exclusively rather than Jehovah doesn't use the tetragrammaton.
And it's all first person.
It's all first person. And it doesn't say, Ross, I brought you out of the land of Egypt. What does it say?
It says, I liberated you.
I liberated you. I liberated you. It is curious. And as I've mentioned before, the difference between geographical extraction, I brought you out, and the state of liberation are two very different things.
That's right.
And a liberated people are a vastly more free and independent people. And those people ought to know that the corresponding blessings are how they obtain benefit or favor from God due to their observance of the conditions of the contract. If you take away the fact that they're liberated and you take away those blessings, then all of a sudden you have the ability to insert control over them. And that's what we're going to see as we move forward through Deuteronomy. All right. So once again, I'm just going to reiterate that we have 9 commandments. We're about to look at 9. Just to remind everybody, it's the Catholic and Lutheran method of counting that divides the first one that we're in now. It divides the first of the 10 words correctly as one commandment, dividing the last one into 2. I think this is the way that it goes. Whereas Hellenistic Judaism, Church Fathers, and Protestant Christianity splits no other gods and idolatry into 2 commandments. So they would say, Ross, that verse 6 and verse 7 is one commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And then verse 8, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness, anything that is in the heavens above or in the earth beneath or under the waters there. Don't bow down to those, don't make little figurines, and so on and so forth.
You know why it's possible? You know why it's possible to have all these different views?
Go ahead.
Because it's hard to tell. It's not. There's no Roman numerals like you have on the one on your refrigerator magnet. But as you look at these, there's no way to tell. There's no indication as to what's number one, what's number two, what's number three. The person, the speaker switching from first to third, third to first. It's just complicated. Whereas the Moses scroll is very simple. I mean, every one of the words of the 10 begins a new line, follows a gap in the text, and ends with Anoki Elohim Eloheka. I am Elohim, your Elohim. Exactly. But otherwise, there's no way to tell.
Guessing.
So, yeah, you're left to guess, like the Lutherans and the Catholics.
That's right. So just going back to verse 7, I think, now see here in the Torah tablet, it says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. But I think what it actually says is, you shall not have other gods before my face. Alpane, is that correct?
Yeah.
We don't have that in the Moses scroll because the Moses scroll doesn't have any anthropomorphic language. So in fact, all 13 references, anthropomorphic references in Deuteronomy, are not found in the Moses scroll.
Interesting.
The second command. Now, by the way, we also have this this clause, this caveat in verse 9: "You shall not bow down to them; you shall not serve them, because I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the third and fourth generation." Really tricky to understand exactly what that means, but that's not found attached to this commandment in the Moses scroll. It's found attached to the seventh commandment. We'll get there.
Yeah.
The second commandment, Ross, is.
And by the way, we have a whole program. We'll put the link in the description on the 10 words.
Yeah, that's right. Now, where are we up to? Are we up to 1, 2, and 3? Okay, so depending on how you count them, but the next verse, verse 12, observe the Sabbath. Observe, Ross, or remember? What do you got?
Yeah, it depends. It depends if you read this or you read Exodus 20. Exodus 20 says remember. Now remember, I want you to remember, Jono, that remember shows up in the Deuteronomy version, but it's later. So you have to look at the differences, and I'll put that link to that document that we put out some time back too, where people can look at all the differences between Exodus and Deuteronomy.
Now, another difference, of course, is that in Exodus and in the Moses scroll, we have the reason given for Shabbat, God saying, I created all the things in 6 days, and in Deuteronomy, I rested on the seventh, or in the Moses scroll, I ceased on the seventh, therefore you shall cease. Not so here, very different, and we find ourselves talking about the Eved again. What do you got, Ross?
Which one? Because let me jump in. One thing you said: observe the Sabbath day to keep it over, as Jehovah your God commanded you. The Moses scroll has this first person. Right. So, all right. So you asked me about the Eved. What's that?
Well, now in verse 14, but the seventh day is a Sabbath unto Jehovah thy God. In it thou shalt not work, no work, thou or thy son or thy daughter, or thy servant, or thy maidservant, nor your ox, your ass, or any cattle, or the stranger that is within your gates. No mention of creation here at all. Thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well. And thou shalt remember that you were wast. Wast is a word we don't get to use very often.
Wast.
A servant in the land of Egypt, and Jehovah thy God brought thee out thence by a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Again, we don't have that in the Moses scroll.
See, there's the word remember. You're going to remember, but it's later in the text, right? Okay.
You got to remember, right? There it is. But what it's saying is, listen, you were Eveds back in Egypt. So make sure that when you observe Shabbat, that your Evedim also can rest as well. They too get a day off. They too must observe Shabbat. And once again, we're talking about the nature of the Eved. It's an interesting thing, by the way. Eved appears in Deuteronomy, what's this, 5:15, 17, 16, 12, 23, 7, 20, a number of times. What's this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know. But none of them are lifted from the Moses scroll. But the Moses scroll does mention Eveds, and it just seems to be a perhaps a bond servant, an indentured servant, someone who has submitted himself to servitude to achieve certain needs, to meet certain needs. And as I mentioned before, it's certainly a preferred system to welfare, as I said, which was so controversial back then. So I'm just saying it again now. Your thoughts, Ross?
Yeah, I think I tell you what, this whole thing between, as you're talking and we're looking at this again, every time I look at one version or the other, I think of all the differences between the two, which you would think would be known to a lot of people, but a lot of people don't know that. That's why it's important to read that document, the differences between the two. The link is in the description. Just look at it. Just take a look.
We were talking about additions and subtractions, the verse about that. Also, the possibility of the 12 spies of Deuteronomy, maybe part of the original, the pericope of Beit Peor, maybe part of the original that's different to the Moses scroll. Well, here we have a commandment, and it has either, Ross, an addition or a subtraction. We're not sure which in the Moses scroll. Tell us about that.
It's right. We have several witnesses, a couple of witnesses several times in 1883 talked about looking at the Shapira manuscript fragments. And almost everyone is in agreement that this is at least two copies of the same text, if that makes sense. And maybe a piece, a smidgen, as we say, of a third copy of the same manuscript. This is what was believed at the time, but almost two and almost identical. Now, if you're going to, first of all, let me say, if you're going to make a forgery, why would you make two? And if you're going to make two, why would you make them with any differences? Why would they?
Yes.
You just can't take a time to check. But anyway, one of the it says both Gutta, Meyer, and Ginsburg mentioned that these are almost exact copies of the same. Some places you could read better what the other one had versus the other copy. But one of the things that they noted, a distinction between, let's call it copy A and copy B, is here. One of the texts said on the commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. One said that thy days may be long and that it may go well with thee, right? The other one just said, honor thy father and thy mother. So which one is it? I mean, that evidently, because this is marked by Ginsburg, evidently they could clearly see that in this text. Now, we know from, particularly if you study Emmanuel Tov or textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible, or if you look at the Septuagint, the Samaritan Pentateuch, and you compare that with the Masoretic text, anything looking academically, you're going to find differences between manuscripts. And this could be as simple as someone who knew a later text which had the phrase that your days may, and
just writing by rote.
He just wrote it by rote. Yeah. I mean, that's very
it's
possible.
It's a possibility. And it is a possibility considering that HA7 in the Moses scroll, if you do not listen to the voice of Elohim to guard, to do all of his commandments and statutes, Elohim will cause you to perish, and he will destroy you upon the face of the ground that you are to enter there to possess it, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, works perfectly with that Deuteronomy Baal Peor pericope, because it says that he destroyed them for going after Baal Peor. Okay, well, here is the curse of that working out there. Also in DC 9 and 10, you shall guard his statutes and his commandments for the sake of your good, for lengthening days upon the land which Elohim, your Elohim, gives you. So the interesting thing about it is that whether it is supposed to be there or not, it actually applies to all of the 10 words. So that's fine. I don't see it as problematic, and it may be intentional. There might be a reason why it's there. But it is interesting to note that one has it, one doesn't. Yeah.
And by the way, for all fairness' sake, let me say, it could just as easily as maybe a pen of a scribe of one of these two copies added the phrase, it could just as easily be a case where the scribe left out a phrase that was in the text before him. So,
Yeah, quite possible. 17, you shall not kill, neither shall you commit adultery, neither shall you steal. Okay, so let's stop there. The interesting thing about that is that it is missing what I call the qualifiers, if you like, or the designation of the other man. So in the Moses scroll, the way that this reads is, you shall not kill the soul of your brother. You shall not commit adultery with the woman of your neighbor. You shall not steal the property of your brother. Yeah. Okay. So there is there are like qualifiers. There's the designation of the other man, which has a part to play, but we'll talk about that in detail some other time. But is there now?
Which
there's a verse in Jeremiah, is there not?
Yeah, you can go there in just a minute. What I was going to say is that qualifier is found on the following. The ones that come after that.
Yeah.
Don't bear false witness and don't commit. Don't covet your neighbor.
That's right.
Anyway. Yeah. So what are you? What?
No, I was just going to say I don't. There is places in the Tanakh where this cluster of do not kill.
Jeremiah 7 and sure, yeah. We call those intertext. 10 Commandments or Decalogue intertext is the way Edon Dershowitz calls them. Very interesting. Yeah, I think Jeremiah 7:9 is the passage. Yeah,
probably right. I think you're right. Bear false witness against thy neighbor. To your point, here are the qualifiers. Neither shall thou covet thy neighbor's wife, neither shall thou covet thy neighbor's house, his manservant, maidservant, ox, ass, anything that is your neighbor's property. These words Jehovah spake all unto the assembly in the mount. So that's it. Hang on. That's it, Ross. That's the 9.
There you go.
Okay. And the way that you do it, of course, is you divide the coveting. If you don't divide the first one, you've got to divide the coveting commandment in order to arrive at your 10. Okay.
And by the way, Deuteronomy uses a different word where Exodus, I really recommend that people click the link and look at the differences between, I'm going to put a link for Hebrew and English, my translation. But, here in Deuteronomy where it says, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's wife, neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's house. So Deuteronomy uses a different word, covet and desire, whereas in Exodus, it's covet and covet. It's the same Hebrew word in Exodus. So in Deuteronomy, it makes more sense that you would split them here to get your 10 if you wanted, because it's a different word, right? Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't desire his stuff. Anyway, all of it is just an attempt to recollect, and they're coming up with ways to make 10 out of 9 is what they're doing.
Yeah, quite right. Spoke with a great voice out of the thick darkness, out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and added no more. He wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. He gave them to me, and it came to pass that when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness while the mountain was still burning with fire, that he came near to me, even all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and said, can he not? Behold, Jehovah our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we've heard his voice out of the midst of the fire, and we've seen this day that God doth speak with man, and he lives. Now, therefore, why should we die? For this great consuming fire will consume us if we hear the voice of Jehovah our God anymore. We're going to die. So who is there of all flesh that heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of the fire as we have and lived? This is great. Look, we have something similar, of course, in the Moses scroll, and it actually is a little bit closer to how it's represented in Exodus. But it does take me back to Exodus 19, verse 9, where, and this is not in the Moses scroll, but God says to Moses, look, I'm going to come and speak to the people audibly so that they'll freak out and they'll believe in you forever. This is a moment in history that is just supposed to be awesome and mind-blowing and scary. And evidently they were scared. Yeah,
I believe that, and I think we would be too. I tell you, when I think about this is the event. We talk about the Decalogue, the giving of the law. God spoke audibly from the midst of the fire on the day of assembly to this assembled group. And I tell you, when you read this particular passage, we get the fear story in 3 different places. Exodus 19:20. We get it here, Deuteronomy chapter 5, and then we get it again in Deuteronomy 18. Now, I'm going to advise people, like I always do, to look horizontally at this. Put Exodus 20 and the fear thing I started the Fear Factor. That's a show on TV. Put the Fear Factor there. Call it the Fear Factor, and then put those three in 3 columns and read the similarities and differences. And then you'll see what I was faced with the first time I began to look at the text of the Moses Scroll. Because all I have for Fragment F is a very, very limited sneak peek at what it has to say. And I recognized one phrase, miyitain, in the Hebrew. And that I knew was from Deuteronomy chapter 5, this phrase. And it's very rare, but it's part of this phrase in verse 29, oh, that there was such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep my commandments always. Now, Jono and I have spent some time, and this is speculation. We may not have time to go too deeply into it, but I'll just say there is a section, what we call Fragment F, that is a very complicated puzzle for most of us, but we've kind of worked out some ideas there that make us think that we're not missing quite as much as most people think. Just to say, though, this part of the document is fragmentary. At least on one copy.
Yeah, that's right. Fragment F, it is sparsely transcribed because it's so difficult to read, and the first column thereof. And then there are 3 more columns of Fragment F, and we don't know what it says on there. And but to your point, and this goes back to something that we were talking about a little bit earlier, there are phrases that appear in Jeremiah that are found only in the Moses Scroll and not found in Deuteronomy. So we know that he had this document. One of those phrases, Ross, is here in verse 29 that you're citing now. And this really is a very big deal. It says, well, let me read the verse. It says in verse 29, oh, that there was such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep all of my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever, is what it says in Deuteronomy. But what it says in the Moses Scroll and what it says in Jeremiah, and in this case it's Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 39, and commentators agree that he's clearly pulling from Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 29. He's paraphrasing there from there. But the verse that he uses at the end, or the phrase he uses at the end of this verse, is to them and to their sons after them. As opposed to, once again, and I
remember when you found
forever.
that.
Well, I was with you when I found it.
That's right.
That's right. And it's interesting because what that does, that phrase is found in Fragment G, the beginning of Fragment G. And so what it does is it ties both of these together, or it potentially ties them together. And what that would suggest is that Fragment F, column A, the next 3 columns would flow into a different a copy of Fragment G. That's all that means. The short way of saying it is we may not be missing any text in the Moses Scroll.
That's right.
So that's that. Now, I've got a paper on that in detail. Maybe we can put the link in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to make a note here. Now, here's the thing. But what a lot of people do is they say, well, Fragment F is a fragment with 4 columns of text, and we can only read a part of it, and therefore we have 3 missing. And so what happens is people say, hey, Ross, Jono, I think this story of the Moses Scroll is fascinating, and I love the text. Maybe those 3 missing columns tell the story of whatever it is that they don't want to be missing from the Pentateuch, right? So they add in, they go, well, maybe it said this, or maybe it said that, or maybe it said that. And what we think now is that I did too, but now we think, well, we don't think anything's missing really.
Well, I'll tell you this, and you know, because I pestered you with this for probably years prior to finding this. What was it, in 24? 24? It must have been 24. That I was always speculating, could it have said this, could it have said that? And I said to you in the end of all of this speculation, I really don't think anything's missing, because everything that could be placed in there, if we look at Deuteronomy, is just emphatic language. It's just expanding and saying the same thing over and over again, but with a bunch of aspects that don't present itself anywhere else in the Moses Scroll, like anthropomorphic language or some such. And so I said, I eventually concluded, I don't think that there is missing information, but we couldn't be so certain until we found this phrase that ties it together. Anyway, once again, the link is in the description. There's my paper there. What did I call it?
I don't remember the name, but whatever. We'll have the link in the description.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so that is that. And then we find ourselves in chapter 6. Ross, is there anything before chapter 6 that you want to highlight?
No, I'm ready. I'm ready to jump in chapter 6. It's out of order, by the way. But
now, just talking about this additional body of law that we touched on just a little bit earlier on, chapter 6, verse 1 begins. How does it begin? Where is chapter 6 here in my Torah tablet? It's hiding, Ross. Where is it?
You're looking for page 44.
Thank you. All right. Quite right. Now this, Ross, this is the commandment and the statutes and the ordinances which Jehovah your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land wherever you go to possess it. And then it goes on and it talks and talks and talks, and it doesn't actually tell you what is about to be announced. What's your feeling on this?
It feels like something's a little bit out of place, but what are your thoughts? A little bit out of
place. Yeah, it does seem out of place. It does. But it's not the first time that we've been promised an extra body of material. I remember, it might have been Numbers chapter 18, or it might have been Leviticus 18, does something similar.
Yeah.
And
then you read it, and it doesn't really lead you to that.
It doesn't lead you anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't lead you anywhere. Yeah. Interesting. All right.
Now, this is some of the best material in Deuteronomy. Jesus refers to the Shema as the greatest commandment.
Yes.
And in one place, at least in the Gospels, it refers to this thing about this, what's love got to do? I tell you, this whole idea of love, though, man. I mean, if you think about it, you go ahead and kick us off, because I've got an idea about this that I think we'll find interesting to add.
Tina Turner in my mind.
What's love got to do? Love God. By the way, EA begins with love God, and GD, or G4, as Dershowitz would call it, ends with love neighbor. So it's kind of bracketing, right? We'll talk a little bit about that, and that's a hint as to something you've been working on, but we're not going to go there yet.
I'm not going to go in there. I saw a great version of Tina Turner live doing Come Together the other day. Boy, it was good.
Was it as good as I just did?
It was almost as good as what you just did, but it was
quite.
pretty good.
Okay.
The Shema is so one of the things that I want to highlight about the Shema. Once again, the Shema comes before the 10 words in the Moses scroll, and you know what? I've got a quote. Can I read a quote from Richard Elliott Freeman, Ross?
Sure.
Here is a quote from Richard Elliott Freeman, and what it has to do with is Elohim, because what we have in the Moses scroll is Elohim Echad, as opposed to that which is in Deuteronomy, Yehovah Echad. In the Moses scroll, it suggests that the Tetragrammaton came, later. It evolved later, and that Elohim is the original, because we know Elohim is a plural. So this is Richard Elliott Freeman from his series, and I do highly recommend that people go and watch this. Find this on YouTube, but he has lectures on YouTube regarding the Torah, and this is from one of his lectures. He says on the name Elohim, the word for God and the word for gods are the same word in Hebrew. Now, it still takes a singular verb when it says God created. So we know that it's meant as a singular, but there it is in the plural. And you say, now, what is this about? That the first successful monotheism in the history of the world uses the plural word for the singular God. And the answer is, nobody knows. We don't know. We don't know. That's what he says. That's a quote from Richard Elliott Freeman. And I would suggest that the reason why scholars don't know, Ross, is because the key explanatory verse regarding this question is distorted in Deuteronomy, and that is the Shema right here, because what we have is we have in the Moses scroll, Shema Yisrael, Elohim Eloheinu, Elohim echad, but in Deuteronomy, Shema Yisrael, Elohim Elohim, Jehovah.
Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, yeah.
Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Jehovah Echad. And it leaves you scratching your head going, what do you mean? And as Idan Dershowitz says in his video regarding, he touches on this in another video as well, Jehovah is one. What is he supposed to be? Two?
Yeah.
Is he supposed to be six? What do you mean he's one? What does this mean?
Right.
But when you read Elohim Echad, it makes perfect sense, and it screams of originality. Your thoughts?
No, I think you're right, and I think when Idan Dershowitz, when he's told in one of the recent videos that you and I watched, where he's being interviewed about this, he actually says, at first, because I always learned it the other way, that Elohim was later and Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, but then he said, now I'm totally sold on the idea that Elohim is the earlier. And I think when you begin to think like that and you begin to look at the text like that, it does make a lot more sense. Look, I know that people have been told other things, but Exodus chapter 6 is one, it's a wink from antiquity that that the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was not known prior to the time of Moses. Now, I know people try to, say, no, because it says all the way back in Genesis 4, then men began to call upon the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, but that is clearly a different text. It's a different source. I think that Elohim is the original, and I think, different people have come up with different ways to translate it, and I think that most of those fell miserably. So,
yeah. So here's a little fun fact for us. We'll just throw this into the mix quickly, and this is for Patty, because I know that Patty's watching. So Patty has always said, well, not always said, but every now and then Patty will say, maybe Jesus had the Moses scroll, and I'd want to go and pat Patty on the head and say, yeah, sure, Patty.
Right.
But I have to say,
now you're thinking, maybe Patty was right.
I think Patty's right. Look, I'm going to go into more detail on this another time. Now is not the time. But I think Patty was onto something, much earlier than
you
got to
pay attention, man. You just missed it too quick. Yeah.
So I apologize, Patty. But here's an example. Okay, here we go.
I'm ready.
It is curious that in John, now we know that John is much later. So
wait a minute, is Jono Vandor about to quote the Gospel
talk about
of
the New
John?
Testament, the Gospel of John?
And I'm about to do a series on the what is happening in the world?
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Crazy
Tell me,
world we live in.
Let me get my pen here.
Okay.
Make sure the recorder is on right now, please.
We know that what is John is 2nd century. Ross, is this what we're to understand? The writer of the Gospel of John.
I think that's what they claim. Late 1st century, early 2nd.
It is curious, however, that in John chapter 10, verse 30, it has the writer of John has Jesus talking, and it seems to have Jesus referring to the Shema, because Jesus says that he and the Father are one, and in the Greek it's the same word that is used in the Septuagint case. So this is well established and noted by commentators. The Pharisees, of course, object to this, and they say, hey, you're equating yourself with theos. Now, theos is the Greek for God, as opposed to kurios, which is the term that would be used for Lord, which is the tetragrammaton. Yeah. Right, that's it.
Okay.
And then, so Elohim versus Yehovah, right, okay. And they say, you're equating yourself with Elohim, with theos. And Jesus then responds to their objection with Psalm 82, right?
Yeah, that's a cool slapback.
It's a cool slapback. It is, actually. And it says, I said, you are Elohim. This is what it says in Psalm 82. So what are you going to do about that? He throws it back.
Right.
And then it turns into a discussion about Psalm 82 and the use of Elohim in that psalm. So they're discussing Elohim solely, and this is the problematic word between Jesus and the Pharisees. But what seems to be implied is a reference to the Shema where Elohim is used as opposed to Yehovah.
Okay.
So maybe. That's a maybe. There's much more to that. We don't have time to do that now, but it is quite exciting. You're going to love it.
Oh, yeah, we're going longs, but I hear you, and I know a little bit more about what you got there, so I can't wait till we can have more time to do that.
All right. Verse 16. Ross, here we have Massah by itself again. 6:16, as you tried him at Massah. We
Oh, yeah.
talked about this when it came up earlier on in the previous book. The Moses scroll has at Taberah, at Masar, at Kibrot,
Cranky Moses.
Cranky Moses, you were rebellious against your Elohim. He has all of these three, but when you have a look at the canonical text, we have Taberah in Numbers chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. We have Masar in Exodus 17, verses 1 to 7, and here. And then we have Kibrot Hata'avah in Numbers 11 again, verses 31 to 34. They're sort of teased out like that. It's just curious. What do you make of it?
I tell you, it's one of those things where the only way to make sense is to stack them side by side and make sense out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
We need to hurry up and get us a synoptic Pentateuch so we can look at those things. Hey, by the way, you skipped over the command to swear in His name.
Oh,
chapter
I did. Go
6,
ahead.
verse 13. But I was just going to add that don't forget, because it says you swear in His name. It's a command. Thou shalt fear Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, and Him shalt thou serve, and shalt swear by His name. We also see that in chapter 10. And by the way, interestingly enough, Jeremiah, once again, Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 4 and following, where he says that that is what leads to the full restoration, is when they learn to swear in truth, in justice, and swear in His name. So
that's right. Now, I've got to go back to verse 12 of Leviticus 19. Is that right? I think that's where I am. Yes. Okay. You shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am Jehovah. So this is absolutely echoing the Moses scroll, and it is different to what we have in Exodus and Deuteronomy, where we are now, the one that you just mentioned. But commentators again say, this is mentioned by prophets like Jeremiah, and it seems to be referring to this reference in Leviticus somehow, and maybe these are both meant to be the same commandments, and there is there's quite a discussion about this. Yeah. Cool.
Good stuff.
All right.
Man.
7 nations, chapter 7. Is there anything else that you wanted to get out of chapter 6?
No, I just, my note says chapter 6, I have more warnings, more slaughter of the inhabitants. I mean, you got a little bit more of that harem text where you go in and hack them up, whack them up, and, that kind of stuff.
Do more of that. Yeah. Yeah, not in the Moses scroll.
Nope.
Also, what is not in the Moses scroll is this verse in chapter 7, when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are about to possess and enter. He dislodges many nations from before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, 7 nations much larger than you, and the Lord your God delivers them, and so on and so forth. But as we've mentioned many times in the Moses scroll, the only target is that of the Amorites.
Yeah, and nor show them any mercy, see? Yeah, that's no mercy. No mercy.
Yeah. And don't be marrying them and smash down their pillars and so on and so forth. You have to be a consecrated people to the Lord your God.
We're going to get more into that next week, by the way. What is it that sets Israel apart? I just wanted to say one thing in chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art a holy people unto Jehovah thy God. Jehovah thy God hath chosen thee to be a people for His own possession above all peoples that are on the face of the earth. Here the phrase is segulah, and that phrase is very interesting. It's like God's special treasure. We see it in Exodus 19:5, Deuteronomy 7:6, Deuteronomy 14:2, Deuteronomy 26, verse 18, Malachi chapter 3, verse 17, and Psalm 135, verse 4.
Do we see it in the Moses scroll, Russ?
Not segulah, not that I recall.
We don't.
Do you?
We don't have that. And once again, I would attribute these verses to the what I call the superiority verses. That is the verses that other nations want to attain. This is the reason why we have anti-Semitism, I think, particularly in religions that want to replace the replacement theology, the supersessionism. This is the reason why people are so upset about Israel not only being in the land but continuing to succeed in the land. is this deep-seated and almost unrecognized desire to be that special people that is extra material, the material that's not found in the Moses scroll, not realizing that perhaps they can, these other nations can achieve.
If they do what we talked about earlier in the show, where they look on the success of Israel and model their way after it.
Model their way after it. Exactly right.
Man.
Yeah, so there we go. Now, verse 12 continues in Ikev. That's where we find ourselves next week. Chapter 7, verse 12, our next Torah portion. How did we do, Ross? I don't even know how long we've been going for, but I think we did pretty well to get all of that.
A little bit over an hour and a half, maybe, but we appreciate people sticking with us. But hey, I mean, I bet you people didn't even know it was so captivating for them. They've just sat here on the edge of their seat and said, give me more, give me more. But here we are at the end of the program.
And there is more Moses Scroll goodness in the next Torah portion as well, but that's where we're going to find ourselves. That's huge. Thank you, everybody. Like, share, comment. We love your comments. Love to see your comments. That's right. And we'll be back this time next week. And until then, have a good one. Ezra, take us on out.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's deep dive into VaEtchanan, a portion so rich we needed a little extra time just to scratch the surface. We covered tablets, testimony, covenant, and that beautiful mutuality of all your heart and all your soul, from us to God, and astonishingly, from God to us. If that doesn't make you want to reread Deuteronomy with fresh eyes, I don't know what will. Thanks for sticking with us through the fire, the voice, and the repetition that's anything but redundant. We hope it stirred some thoughts, challenged a few assumptions, and maybe even sparked a new question or two. Until next time, keep digging, keep wrestling, and, as always, bring your whole heart and soul to the text. Shalom.